The men met today in Mayfield to discuss the implications of rejecting the Commission's order to trial the semi-trailers. They believe their job functions may change, with train drivers, for example, being asked to do a more menial task with the introduction of the 80-ton Brentwood semi-trailer. The company believes the Brentwood trailers will be more economic than the conventional rail system, but the members of the FIA disagree. So after a working meeting, the men decided to try out the trailers to prove the company wrong. State Secretary of the FIA, Bob Hopkins.
They're a very responsible group, the Traffic Department, and they see that the industry is in trouble. They understand that there are problems, and they've proven, in my view, their bona fides in saying, OK, we'll prove this doesn't work.
So they don't want it to work?
No, they're not going to actually affect the Brentwood trailer itself. They are of the view that the Brentwood trailers are not going to prove to be the be-end to end all that the company claim they're going to be.
Nevertheless, coiled rods were being loaded on the trailers today by rod mill workers who aren't sympathetic to the transport man's fault. The 14-day trial will begin tomorrow morning and will be supervised by BHP staff as well as local and state delegates from the FIA.
The manual was drawn up in conjunction with the Department of Planning and the Environment, the Traffic Authority and Land Commission. Entitled The Streets Where We Live, it takes a critical look at the rules and concepts which have to date determined residential street design. Former Chairman of the Land Commission, Mr Henry Wardlaw.
Well, we've tended very much to plan our roads by formula. Every council has its own code which sets out exactly how wide particular streets should be. And the result of this has been that a lot of our residential streets are not very safe. More than half the fatalities that take place in Sydney, for instance, take place on local roads, not on the main roads. And also we've ended up with some pretty monotonous suburbs. Everyone looks very much the same as another. What this manual aims to do is to go right back to basics, to treat the design of residential streets from the standpoint of the design of part of the residential environment, not the design of a mini main road which just happens to have houses along it.
Now this could be readily implemented in new residential areas, but what about older, more established suburbs? Can they be improved?
Well, the manual is aimed specifically at new residential areas, but certainly the principles that it sets out can be applied, and in fact in some areas are being applied, to improving the situation in old suburbs.
Industrial action over the Pelican Bowling Club by the Australian Workers' Union began after the club sacked 3 permanent bar staff, members of the Liquor Trade Union. Relations between the AWU and the club were further strained after the club began using non-union labour to prepare the greens. After yesterday's meeting, Australian Workers' Union organiser Mr Max Redding said the greenkeepers voted to continue their industrial bans on the club and its members. He said the bans will remain until the club solves its dispute with the Liquor Trade Union and gives greenkeepers certain assurances of job security.
We set out to protect our industry, and we will not allow scabs to come in and do our work, and that is exactly what's happening here. It doesn't matter whether they call them retired people of another union or whatever, that's irrelevant. The thing is, they are crossing a picket line, and they are doing work that is normally done by our members, and we shan't tolerate that.
The greenkeepers say that until their demands are met, they will picket the Pelican Club and any other club where Pelican Club members may be playing. More than 500 people attended the public meeting at Swansea High School, jointly organised by the Caves Beach Progress Association and the Swansea High Level Bridge Committee. Speakers for both organisations outlined their objections to a second low-level opening bridge across the Swansea Channel, proposed by the state government in its road improvement program for the Newcastle region. Spokesman for the High Level Bridge Committee, Mr George Keegan, says he believes opponents of the scheme are prepared to take tougher action in their efforts to prevent a second low-level bridge from going ahead.
We have every hope of stopping them. As you can see from tonight's public meeting, there's over 500 people in there, and believe me, they all want to see some change made.
What do you think of the failure of invited politicians to attend your meeting?
Well, the state member, of course, it's on his patch. I feel it's such an important issue. He would have broken away from Parliament, say, at 4 o'clock this afternoon, come home for the meeting. He could have been back and in the House tomorrow morning bright and early, and he would have seen the real need and the effect it's having on the community.
What are your major objections to a second low-level bridge?
The major objection is wrapped up in 2 parts. Firstly, we're concerned about the environmental issues as the highway or the road through Swansea goes. Swansea is affected badly by pollution, both noise and smoke emission. And the other, of course, is the bridge, is a high-level bridge or a tunnel for that matter. We're quite open-minded, where we don't mix water and vehicle traffic. Now, the world over, they just don't mix that type of 2 types of traffic.
Now, as a private individual, why are you so concerned with seeing a high-level bridge go ahead over the Swansea Channel?
My main concern is that I drive up and down the highway to Sydney at least twice a week. I've continually been pulled up at the traffic lights at Swansea. I breathe the polluted air, I hear the trucks, and I just can't understand why the people of Swansea have had to put up with it so long. And so my concern lies in that and that alone.
Professor Creasman says the incidence of cervical cancer isn't increasing because it's being detected and treated before the cancer develops.
But we have what we call a precancerous lesion, which means abnormal cells present on the cervix. That particular part of the spectrum is increasing, and it's, at least in the United States, really at epidemic proportion.
Why is this so?
Probably related to the cause of this disease process, which is directly related to the sexual activity of the female.
How do you treat these precancerous lesions?
The precancerous lesions, yes, this can be done very simply, easily in the office with treatments that are currently available with essentially 100% cure.
So the way to prevent cervical cancer is to get in early and have pap smears?
Certainly that would identify the individual with these changes very early. And we know that it's directly related to the onset of sexual activity and also to the number of sexual partners that the female has.
The Hunter River remains stranded off Newcastle, where it has been waiting to enter since Sunday. The Seamen's Union, the Institute of Marine and Power Engineers, and the Merchant Service Guild took it in turns to impose 24-hour bans on the ship. Today, the Seamen's Union black-banned the Hunter River once again. The ship has been contracted to export Alcan aluminium ingots direct from Newcastle to Asia, the first time the company has tried this on a regular basis. Maritime unions object to the ship because it is registered under the Panamanian flag of convenience and uses a Filipino crew. The unions claim that such ships are unhealthy rust buckets using virtual slave labour. They want the use of Australian ships and crews. The Hunter River is a brand new ship and shows no signs of rust. The Al Salam is quite different. Registered under the Liberian flag of convenience, it is taking on cargo at BHP. Earlier this week, it loaded aluminium from the Tomago smelter. The Seamen's Union says it could be delayed when it is due to leave port next week.
The Minister, accompanied by Parks and Wildlife officials, landed at Dudley after an aerial inspection of the spectacular stretch of coastline which will form the Glenrock State Recreation Area. The land, which will come under control of the Department of Parks and Wildlife, stretches from Merriweather Heights some 6 kilometres to Dudley and includes the existing reserve at Glenrock Lagoon. There's still some way to go before the government acquires all of the land contained in the reserve. But an arrangement of land swaps with BHP, which owns a large portion, and negotiations with the Water Board seem likely to ensure the reserve does become a reality before too long. The Minister was adamant that today's announcement is quite different from past coastal protection plans, which turned out to be paper tigers.
In the past, we've had studies that have identified the area that we are now saying will be the Glenrock State Recreation Area. What we're saying today is that having looked at those studies, it's our intention that they will indeed be the Glenrock State Recreation Area.
How long before it becomes a reality?
The outstanding area of negotiations will be with the Water Board, and I believe that that can be resolved at least within 2 years. We know that it's not going to present any outstanding problem. And I think the important thing to stress is that we weren't prepared to wait till those negotiations were complete before announcing that the government's intention is very firmly that this be a state recreation area. And if anyone came along with alternative uses for the land that we've looked at today, they'd be disappointed.
Richard Face, who's put up a long fight to see Glenrock Lagoon and the adjacent coastal area protected, was particularly happy today.
As I said recently at an open forum, when I saw this day, I'd be one of the happiest days in my political life, and whilst I want to attain a lot more, this will be something that's not for me, it's for the generations to come.
The pipes and drums of the 16th Transport Squadron at Adamstown piped the men of the 130 Signal Squadron onto the Oval for inspection. After inspection, the men advanced in review, an army tradition which dates back to the 18th century. The oldest part of the ceremony, however, was the march into the city, where the squadron was challenged by Chief Inspector Hickson for the Maitland Division and received a salute from Acting Shire President Bruce Mackenzie.
The troops of 130th Signal Squadron exercising their privilege and right to pass through Port Stephens, with swords drawn, bayonets fixed, drums beating and band playing.
I acknowledge your privileges and right. Pass the troops of the 130th Signal Squadron.
prayers for peace were held in Pacific Park before the big march to Civic Park. The marchers assembled under banners from various political parties such as the Labor Party, the Democrats and the Nuclear Disarmament Party, among others. Hundreds joined the march, which wound its way down Hunter Street. According to one of the organisers, Australians see New Zealand taking a firm stand against nuclear warships, and peacemakers around the world are growing stronger, despite ever-increasing pressure exerted by the superpowers. The march finished in Civic Park for entertainment, refreshments and to hear speakers such as Australian peace campaigner Nancy Shelley and Marianne Hawkins, who stood as a candidate for the Nuclear Disarmament Party in the recent federal elections. It was obvious that Uncle Sam was not the most popular identity at the park today, as he towered over a booth dancing, playing drums and juggling mock MX missiles. For the young ones, however, the issues surrounding nuclear disarmament were a bit much to understand. They were more interested in just cooling off.
Stephen Threlfo has been working on his discovery in his Barnsley Heights garage for the last 2 years. He has been able to devote his full attention to perfecting the fuel because he is on an invalid pension following an industrial accident which fractured his skull. The basic ingredients of the fuel are deceptively simple: a few fresh carrots and some eucalyptus. Mr. Threlfo first blended the ingredients when following the hangover fuel recipe recommended by his grandmother. Just how the mix becomes explosive is a secret he is keeping to himself, but he says it does work. So far, the major oil companies have ignored Mr. Threlfo's invention.
Well, I've been to a couple of major oil refineries, and the fact that this is so easy, so simple to make, you can grow it in your own backyard, plenty of gum leaves around, they've got to be a special type, huh? They weren't really interested because it was too cheap and too good an alternative to what they had already.
Mr. Threlfo proved to me how simple the fuel is to make. We wore gas masks because the chemical process is on constant fumes.
What's going on now, once it's been brewed, you've got to put it in and boil it for approximately 3 minutes 29.82 seconds just to get the right consistency and the right level of inflammability.
All I do now is I've got to put on the combustor meter to check the octane rating, and if it hits over the 400 mark, it's a really mean brew. It should really be nice brew. Anything over that is great.
And indeed, it was a good brew, with the octane rating rising to well over the 400 mark. Mr. Threlfo calls his invention Caro Eucalyptol 400 and uses it to run his lawnmower. The mower and this 4-cylinder car engine have been specially modified to accept the fuel. With the fuel in the engine tank, the mower started first time. Caro Eucalyptol is Mr. Threlfo is now negotiating with several industrial firms for the manufacture of Caro Eucalyptol 400. He says it's only coincidence that he publicly announced his invention on April 1st.
Much of this is the result of the Newcastle Rugby League coaching director Dennis Ward in this panel, and the likes of Belrane's international Wayne Pearce, who comes this way regularly on lecture
yesterday's game.
Today he visited a few schools, including Carter, Beresfield and Raymond.
No, I won't tell that one because it's not.
How do you find rugby league in the schools now that you've been going around for, well, 12 months or so? Is it building up, or do you see that resistance that we've heard about?
No, the main resistance comes from parents because they read the papers, and the papers tend to blow things out of proportion, and that's where the main resistance comes from. But the actual kids, are in love with the game. Every kid in the schools, almost every kid in the schools follows league, and quite a lot play the game. And I'm sure there's a lot more that would like to play if their parents weren't so scared and didn't prevent them from playing.
What would you say to the parents that do feel that it's a game of thuggery, shall I say?
Well, I'd ask them to not believe everything they read in the papers. If it was a game of thuggery, I wouldn't be promoting it in the schools, and I can assure you that it's not. And in the it's my sixth season in first grade, and in that period of time, I can assure you that a lot of illegal play and dirty play has gone out of the game, and it's much, much cleaner now than it was 6 or 7 years ago.